Brothers and sisters, some of you are here today and you feel lost. You feel like the ground beneath you is shaking, like everything familiar is slipping away. And I'm here to tell you, this is not the end. This is not destruction. This is divine interruption. God does not change a life gently. He is not in the business of small renovations. He is a consuming fire. He will burn away everything that does not belong, and you must not resist him. Up call. It is not an accident, nor is it a sign that God has abandoned you. In fact, it is often the very opposite. When your life is shaken, when everything feels unstable, it is often because God is moving you towards something greater. He is stirring within you a holy discontent, a restlessness that will not allow you to stay where you are. And yet, so many of us misunderstand this feeling. We assume that because life is hard, we must be out of God's will. We assume that because doors are closing, because people are walking away, because the familiar is crumbling, we must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. But that is not always the case. Throughout Scripture, we see that God's chosen people were often led into discomfort before they were led into destiny. Look at Abraham. He was called out of everything he had ever known, told to leave his homeland, his family, his security, and go to a land that God would show him. There were no guarantees, no clear map, no step-by-step plan, just a call to trust. And the moment he obeyed, his life changed forever. But it was not an easy road. It was not a comfortable journey. Look at Joseph, sold into slavery, betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, thrown into prison. Do you think he ever wondered, God, where are you? Why is this happening to me? But every moment of pain was preparing him. Every betrayal, every loss, every unjust situation was positioning him for a future he could not yet see. If Joseph had never been in prison, he would have never stood before Pharaoh. If he had never suffered, he would have never been in a position to save his family and an entire nation. And then there's Moses, raised in Pharaoh's house, living in luxury, but forced into exile, wandering in the wilderness for years. But it was in that wilderness that God spoke to him. It was in that discomfort that his calling was revealed. Had Moses remained in Pharaoh's palace, he would have never become the deliverer of Israel. Why do we expect our stories to be different? Why do we assume that the call of God should be comfortable? If the greatest men and women of faith had to walk through trials, if they had to endure hardship, if they had to be shaken from their comfort to step into their destiny, why do we believe we should be any different? Some of you are fighting the very thing God is trying to use to change you. You are praying for deliverance when God is calling you to endurance. You are begging him to take away the pain, but he is allowing the pain to shape you, to break you, to refine you. Because without discomfort, there is no transformation. Without a breaking, there can be no rebuilding. Without the fire, there can be no refining. Think about it. When does a seed break open? When it is buried in the ground, pressed under the weight of the soil, surrounded by darkness. It does not look like life. It does not look like growth. But in that hidden place, in that pressure, something is happening. And in due time, that seed pushes through the soil, transformed into something greater than it ever was before. Some of you are in that buried place right now. You feel hidden, forgotten, like nothing is happening. But I am telling you, God is working. He is using every tear, every disappointment, every hardship to prepare you for what is ahead. He is using discomfort to push you out of where you have been and into where he is calling you to go. So do not despise the process. Do not resist the shaking. If you are feeling unsettled, if the things that once satisfied you no longer do, if doors are closing, if you feel like you are being stripped of everything familiar, do not panic. Lift your eyes to heaven and recognize what is happening. God is moving. God is calling. Your life is about to change. And the discomfort you feel right now, that is the evidence. That is the sign. It is a divine wake-up call. Do not ignore it. When God is preparing to change your life, He will close doors that you were never meant to walk through. He will remove opportunities, relationships, and even dreams that no longer serve His purpose for you. And though it may feel like rejection, though it may feel like loss, it is actually divine protection. You see, we are so limited in our vision. We cling to things that were only meant to be temporary, mistaking them for permanent fixtures in our lives. We fight to hold on to what God is trying to take away, thinking that we know what is best. But God, in His wisdom, will not allow us to settle for anything less than His perfect will. Think about how often in Scripture God closed doors to redirect His people. Consider Paul. He had a desire to preach in Asia, but the Spirit of God would not allow him. Imagine that. A good desire, a holy mission, and yet God said no. Why? Because Paul's purpose was in Macedonia, not Asia. Had God not closed the door, Paul would have gone in the wrong direction. Had Paul stubbornly pushed ahead, ignoring the Spirit's guidance, he would have missed the divine assignment waiting for him elsewhere. We see the same pattern in the lives of others. Look at Elijah. He was sent to a brook where God provided water and ravens brought him food. But one day the brook dried up. The provision stopped. God closed the door, not because Elijah had sinned, not because he was abandoned, but because it was time to move. If the brook had continued to flow, Elijah might have stayed there forever, but God had another place for him. There was a widow in Zarephath who needed him, a greater miracle waiting on the other side of his obedience. How often do we mourn when a brook dries up in our lives? How often do we cry out to God, asking why He took something away, when in reality He is simply trying to move us forward? Some of you are stuck in places you were never meant to remain. Some of you are clinging to a job, a relationship, a situation that has expired, and God is trying to shut the door. But because you do not understand, you resist, you fight, you try to reopen what God has already closed. But let me tell you something. When God closes a door, do not try to force it open. Do not try to make something work that was never meant to last, because if you do, you will only delay what God has for you. You will only prolong the process of transformation that He is trying to bring into your life. Sometimes a closed door is God's greatest mercy. That job you didn't get, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. That relationship that ended, it wasn't abandonment, it was protection. That opportunity that slipped through your fingers, it wasn't failure, it was preparation. God sees what you cannot see. He knows what is ahead. He knows the dangers that you are unaware of, the traps that have been set before you. And in His love, He will remove anything that stands in the way of His greater purpose for you. So do not mourn over closed doors. Do not weep over things that God Himself has removed from your life. Instead, trust Him. Trust that if He is taking something away, it is because He has something better. Trust that if He is shutting a door, it is because He is opening another. Some of you are on the verge of stepping into something new, but you must first let go of what was. You must first release what is no longer meant for you, because you cannot receive what is in God's hand while your own hands are still full of the past. Surrender. Stop looking back. Stop trying to revive what God has put to rest. Stop resisting the changes He is bringing, because the moment you stop fighting and start trusting, you will see what He has been preparing all along. You will understand why the doors had to close. and you will walk boldly into the new thing he has for you. When God is shifting your life, some relationships will fall away. This is not a mistake. This is not rejection. This is refinement. You cannot take everyone where God is leading you, and for many, this is one of the hardest truths to accept. We form attachments. We grow comfortable with the people around us, assuming they will always walk with us. We assume that just because someone has been part of our journey so far, they are meant to be with us forever. But that is not how God works. When he begins to elevate you, when he starts calling you to a higher level, he will begin to remove people who cannot go where you are going. Think about Abraham. He was called by God to leave his homeland, his people, and everything he knew to follow a promise that was not yet visible. But what happened? He took Lot with him. God never told Abraham to bring Lot, but he did it anyway. And as time went on, conflict arose between them. Their herdsmen began to argue, and the land could not support them both. Eventually, they had to separate. The moment Lot left, God gave Abraham fresh vision, fresh direction. Some of you are carrying people into a season where they do not belong. You are trying to hold on to relationships that are no longer aligned with where God is taking you. And as a result, there is friction. There is conflict. There is delay. Because when you bring the wrong people into your next season, it creates unnecessary struggle. Look at Jesus. When he performed miracles, when he raised the dead, when he went into deep moments of prayer, he did not take everyone with him. He had 12 disciples, but there were times when he only took Peter, James, and John. Why? Because not everyone could handle where he was going. Not everyone had the faith, the maturity, or the spiritual strength to walk with him at that level. If Jesus himself had to be selective about who was with him in certain seasons, why do we believe we can take everyone with us? There are people in your life right now who are meant for the season you are leaving, but not for the season you are entering. They were there to help you grow, to teach you something, or to support you in a particular stage of your journey. But now, their part in your story is over. If you try to hold on, if you try to keep them close when God is trying to separate you, you will only create unnecessary pain. Some people will leave voluntarily. They will distance themselves. They will misunderstand you, or they will simply fade away. Do not chase them. Do not beg them to stay. Do not try to force something that God himself is removing. Others will have to be removed through difficult conversations and painful goodbyes. But you must trust that if God is calling you higher, he knows who is meant to walk with you and who is not. This is not about pride. This is not about thinking you are better than anyone else. This is about obedience. This is about aligning your life with the will of God. Because some people, no matter how much you love them, are a weight. They hold you back. They drain your energy. They distract you from your purpose. And until you let them go, you will not see the full manifestation of what God wants to do in your life. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will feel lonely at times. Yes, you may question why certain people are no longer in your life. But you must trust the process. You must believe that God knows what he is doing, and you must move forward even when it means walking alone for a season. Some of you are delaying your breakthrough because you are too afraid to let go. You are holding on to toxic friendships, unequally yoked relationships, and people who are not pushing you toward Christ. And as long as you keep them close, you will remain stuck. You will remain in the same cycle, wondering why nothing is changing. Let them go. Trust that if they were truly meant to be part of your destiny, they would still be here. Stop trying to drag people into a future they were never meant to enter. Because when you finally release what is no longer meant for you, you will find freedom, clarity, and a fresh move of God in your life. The right people will come. The right relationships will form. And you will see that every loss was actually gain. The battle gets fiercer before the breakthrough. This is a truth that many overlook, yet it is one of the clearest signs that your life is about to change. When God is on the verge of shifting you into something greater, The enemy will not sit idly by. He will do everything he can to stop you, to discourage you, and to make you turn back before you step into your promise. The opposition increases when you are closest to your breakthrough, and if you are not discerning, you might mistake the battle as a sign that you are on the wrong path, when in reality, it is confirmation that you are exactly where you need to be. Look at the life of Jesus. Before he stepped into his public ministry, before he performed a single miracle, he was led into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan himself. Right before he launched into his purpose, he faced an intense season of testing. The enemy came at him with every temptation, trying to make him doubt his identity, trying to lure him away from the mission. If Jesus had to endure warfare before stepping into his calling, why would we expect anything less? Moses faced intense opposition right before the Israelites were set free. Pharaoh hardened his heart, refusing to let them go. The oppression increased. The people suffered even more. In fact, things got worse before they got better. But that was not a sign that God had abandoned them. It was a sign that deliverance was near. The battle was fierce because freedom was at hand. And then there's Job, a man who was upright before God, a man who walked in righteousness. Yet in a single moment he lost everything, his family, his health, his wealth. His entire life was shaken. But that was not the end of his story. The battle was intense, but the breakthrough was greater. Job endured, and in the end, God restored everything, giving him twice as much as he had before. Some of you are in that place right now. The attacks have increased. The pressure is unbearable. The doubts are louder than ever, and you're wondering, why is this happening? Why does it feel like the closer I get to my breakthrough, the harder things become? But I want you to hear this clearly. The battle is a sign. It is a sign that the enemy sees what you cannot see. He knows that your breakthrough is coming. He knows that God is moving in your life, and he is desperate to stop it. Look at your life. Look at the areas where the attack has been the fiercest. That is often the area where God is about to bring the greatest breakthrough. The enemy does not waste his energy on people who are going nowhere. He fights those who are a threat. He fights those who are stepping into purpose. He fights those who are on the verge of transformation. This is not the time to give up. This is not the time to shrink back. This is the time to stand firm, to press in, to hold on to the promises of God like never before. Because the enemy can attack, but he cannot stop what God has ordained. He can try to delay, but he cannot deny what God has planned for your life. Some of you are thinking about quitting. Some of you are weary from the fight, but do not give up now. You are too close. You have come too far. The very fact that the battle has intensified is proof that you are on the verge of something great. Do not let the enemy deceive you into thinking that this struggle means you are on the wrong path. If anything, it means you are right on track. The storm always rages hardest before it clears. The night is darkest before the dawn. The enemy attacks hardest when he knows he is losing ground. So stand firm, keep fighting, keep praying, keep believing, because the battle may be fierce, but the breakthrough will be greater. And when you come out on the other side, you will see that every struggle, every tear, every moment of pain was worth it. Your life is about to change. Do not turn back now. Suddenly, everything starts falling into place. The waiting, the struggles, the painful goodbyes, and the battles you thought would break you. Suddenly, they all start making sense. When God is about to change your life, there comes a moment when everything begins to align in ways you could not have orchestrated on your own. Doors that were once closed begin to open effortlessly. People you never expected to meet come into your life at just the right time. Opportunities that seemed impossible suddenly become reality. And when this happens, you will know it was never by your strength, but by the hand of God. We serve a God of divine alignment. He is never late, never out of sync and never caught off guard. Every delay, every detour, and every disappointment was part of a greater plan, a process of preparation that had to take place before you could step into your purpose. And when the appointed time comes, everything shifts. Look at Joseph. Years of suffering, betrayal, and false accusations kept him in prison. For a long time it seemed like his dreams were nothing more than distant hopes, but then in a single day, suddenly he was brought before Pharaoh. Suddenly he went from a prisoner to the second most powerful man in Egypt. The years of waiting were over, and everything he had endured had prepared him for that moment. If Joseph had been released too soon, he would not have been in the right place at the right time. But God's timing was perfect. The same happened with Esther. She was just an ordinary Jewish girl, unnoticed and unknown. But suddenly she was brought into the palace. Suddenly she was positioned as queen. And when the time came to save her people, she realized that everything had happened for a reason. She was not there by accident. She was placed there for such a time as this. Some of you have been in a long season of waiting. You have been praying, believing, but nothing seemed to be changing. You wondered if God had forgotten you. You wondered if the doors would ever open. But hear me, when God moves, he moves suddenly. What took years to build, what seemed impossible for so long, can shift in a moment. There is a reason why you had to wait. There is a reason why things didn't happen when you wanted them to. God was working behind the scenes, aligning people, circumstances, and timing to bring everything together perfectly. He was strengthening your character, refining your faith, and preparing you so that when the moment came, you would be ready. Many people quit too soon. They grow weary in the waiting. They let discouragement take over and they walk away just before the breakthrough. But those who endure, those who refuse to give up, will see the fulfillment of God's promises. The doors that wouldn't open before, they weren't meant to. The people who left, they weren't part of your destiny. The disappointments, they were simply redirections leading you to something better. And when the shift happens, you will understand why the waiting was necessary. You will see how God's hand was orchestrating every detail, working all things together for your good. The connections will come effortlessly. The provision will be there. The right opportunities will align. It won't be forced. It will be a divine unfolding of God's perfect plan. Some of you are closer than you think. You have endured the shaking. You have walked through the fire. You have fought battles that no one else knows about. And now you are on the verge of a shift. The pieces are coming together. The breakthrough is near. Stay faithful. Keep trusting, because when God moves, everything will change. Suddenly,